The forest doesn't keep secrets, it buries them. It's a beautiful lie, the idea of the woods being a place of peace and escape. We see the sunlight dappling the ferns, we smell the pine and the damp earth, and we forget what lies beneath the canopy. An endless, indifferent dark. We forget that the woods were here long before us, and they will be here long after. They are a silent, colossal witness. Every year, they claim their tribute. Campers and hikers simply vanish deep in forgotten woods. Some are found days later, disoriented and silent. Others are never seen again. Their cases file away into the National Missing Persons Database, a cold statistic of the untamed wild. Tonight, I'll tell you 3 stories from that dark file. 3 tales of those who went camping, seeking the quiet of nature, only to find something ancient and hungry waiting for them. These are the narratives of the lost ones. Story 1: The Disappearing Footsteps. This first story comes from the edges of the Wilerdale National Forest, a place notorious for its sudden, unpredictable blankets of fog. It was supposed to be a simple, classic weekend getaway, a final trip before the summer ended. There was Eli, the cautious one who checked the map every hour, Mark, the jokester who never stopped talking, and Jenna, the pragmatist who brought all the gear. They hiked deep, chasing the trail until the sound of passing cars was completely gone, replaced only by the burbling of the river. The first day went perfectly. They set up camp by a swift-moving creek, enjoyed canned beer and cheap hot dogs, and fell asleep to the comforting sound of rushing water. But that night, the forest began its turn. Around midnight, a sound cut through the drone of the water. Footsteps. They were slow, heavy, and dragging, moving in a deliberate, measured circle around their small nylon tent. Eli, who was closest to the zipper, woke Mark and Jenna with a nudge. They lay there, frozen, listening to the sound of something large and ponderous, completing its circuit right outside the canvas. Eli, clutching the heavy metal maglite, slowly unzipped the entrance. He pointed the powerful beam out, sweeping it through the trees, but there was nothing. The moonlight had been replaced by a thick, smothering fog that had rolled in silently. He could only see a few feet in front of him. The sound of breathing, deep, wet, and labored, faded slowly into the wall of white, swallowed by the mist. "Probably a deer," Mark whispered, but they all knew it wasn't a deer. The next morning, the proof was waiting. The fog had lifted, revealing the damp, mossy earth. There, leading from the tree line, were clear, unmistakable footprints. They were barefoot, adult-sized, with an uncanny width to the heel. They led right up to the tent, encircled it, and then they simply stopped. As if the thing making them had lifted into the air, or simply vanished into the earth. They didn't discuss it much, not wanting to give it power, but the ease and laughter of the day before were gone. They packed up slowly, intending to head out early, but as twilight began to bleed the color from the sky, they made the fatal mistake of stopping for one last meal. That night, the footsteps came again. Only this time, they didn't circle the tent. They came right to the entrance, and the heavy dragging sound of wet feet on dirt transitioned to the unsettling, unmistakable sound of wet feet on the tent's plastic tarp. They were inside the vestibule. A paralyzing terror seized the 3 friends. Mark screamed first, a sharp, choked sound of pure panic. Jenna's eyes were wide, fixed at the corner of the tent where the nylon fabric seemed to be stretching and straining. She later described seeing something crouched in the corner, a shadow that defied anatomy, a shape that bent wrong, grinning without a face, its shadow cast not by an external light, but by some intrinsic, internal darkness. Eli reacted with pure instinct. He ripped open the zipper and bolted. He didn't grab the flashlight, he didn't grab his boots, he just ran, the sound of Mark and Jenna's panicked cries being strangled by the silence behind him. He ran blindly, calling their names until his voice was raw. The fog, a malicious, intelligent thing, swallowed his voice and disoriented him until he didn't know which way was upriver or downriver. When rescuers finally found him 2 days later, he was only 1 mile from the campsite. He was huddled beneath a towering Douglas fir, hugging the tree trunk so tightly his fingers were blue, whispering the same 3 words over and over. Don't follow the steps, they lead back. Mark and Jenna were never found. The Wilerdale National Forest kept them. But sometimes, seasoned hikers who camp in that area report a peculiar sudden stillness in the deep night, followed by the faint sound of footsteps outside their tents. They don't circle long. They complete their path just once before going silent again, leaving the sound of breathing fading into the trees.
Story 2: The Hidden Camp.
The lure of the unknown is a powerful intoxicant, and for some, it's fatal. Darren and Griffin weren't just weekend hikers. They were amateur explorers, obsessed with maps and forgotten logging roads. One summer, they set out to map an unregistered, long-abandoned route high in the Cascades, believing they could be the first to truly document it. They hiked deep, too deep, following crumbling cairns and faint depressions in the earth until their GPS completely lost signal. They were in a part of the mountain range that wasn't marked on any digital map, a true pocket of wilderness. There, in a small, strangely open clearing, they found something that instantly broke the illusion of pristine nature, a hidden campsite. It wasn't an ancient ruin or a derelict shack. It was recent and deeply unnerving. A small tent was pitched, a child's pop-up tent, bright blue and cheerful, standing in stark contrast to the mossy gloom. Nearby, a fire pit contained freshly burned wood, and a half-eaten apple sat on a tree stump beside a frayed duffel bag. This wasn't an abandoned camp. Someone had been here very recently. With a growing sense of dread, they cautiously investigated. Inside the duffel bag, Griffin pulled out a collection of strange items: small children's clothes, neatly folded, a coil of heavy-gauge rope, and several rolls of industrial-strength duct tape. The unsettling implication of what this camp was for and who occupied it hung heavy in the mountain air. Someone disturbed, someone predatory, was using this hidden spot. They quickly retreated to their own vehicle, a beat-up 4x4 camper they used for sleeping, parking it a respectful distance down the trail, praying whoever owned the blue tent was miles away. As they sat in the oppressive silence of the evening, nervously eating canned soup, their radio, which had been playing nothing but static for hours, suddenly crackled to life. It was 2 men's voices, rough, low, and heavily accented. They weren't speaking into the radio, but rather over it. It sounded like they were using a walkie-talkie on the same rare frequency. "No, just over by the fallen birch. We'll need another load of firewood before midnight," one voice rasped. Then the second voice replied, a casual, terrifying whisper. "Yeah, and hey, I think we found another camp." The temperature in the camper seemed to plummet. The air grew heavy, thick with unseen presence. They killed the soup. They turned off every single light, plunging the camper into absolute darkness, listening to their own thundering heartbeats. Outside, the silence was broken by the sound of gravel crunching. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and undeniably coming closer. They were heavier than the footsteps from the blue tent, heavier than any normal hiker's step. Then there was laughter, low, guttural, and too close. It wasn't amusement, it was the sound of discovery. Darren, unable to help himself, risked one tiny peek out the driver's side window. His blood ran cold. He saw 2 figures at the tree line, massive silhouettes half hidden by the absolute darkness. They didn't gesture, they didn't walk. They didn't speak again. They just watched. Two static, silent observers standing guard over the trail. They sat rigid until the faint pre-dawn light began to soften the shadows. When the sun finally rose, the figures were gone. With shaking hands, Darren turned to wake Griffin so they could flee. Griffin was gone. His sleeping bag was crumpled, the zipper open, and a cold draft blew in from the cab. The driver's door of the camper was slightly ajar. The police were called when Darren finally managed to get to a service station 15 miles away. They later found the old 4x4 camper completely overturned, resting on its side, the door ripped wide open. There was no sign of Darren. There was no sign of the blue child's tent. They only found the radio, lying on the seat, its speaker playing a continuous hiss of static, which was broken just once by a deep, satisfied man's voice, whispering, "We found another camp."
Story 3. The Sixth Tent.
The tradition started innocently enough. A group of college friends, 5 of them, went camping every fall in the Wilerdale National Forest. There was Ava, the heart of the group, Dave, the sensible driver, Sally, the quiet observer, Eric, the class clown, and the one who survived, the one who told this story, the narrator. They knew the woods, they knew the routine, setting up 5 identical dome tents in a perfect semicircle around the fire pit. They laughed late into the night, drank cheap whiskey, and told the same ghost stories they'd told since freshman year. But as the night wore on, the narrator felt a pervasive, creeping sense of wrongness. Every time they glanced toward the tree line, they swore there was another tent, off by the dense hemlocks where the shadows were deepest. A 6th tent, small, low to the ground, and a dull, indistinguishable gray. They blinked, dismissed it as the whiskey, and focused on the fire. Then the whiskey wore off, and the 6th tent was still there. When midnight came, Ava's scream tore through the forest. It wasn't a yelp of fear, but a sound of sheer, unadulterated terror, an absolute violation of peace. Everyone stumbled out of their tents, flashlights shaking wildly. Ava was frozen by the fire, pointing a trembling finger toward Eric's tent. Dave, the first to reach the zipper, pulled it open and screamed, echoing Ava's fear. Eric was dead. He was still rolled up inside his sleeping bag, zipped up to his neck, but his body inside the nylon casing was impossibly contorted. His limbs seemed to have been violently folded at angles no human joint could sustain. His spine twisted, his head angled unnaturally. His face, visible in the beam of the flashlight, was a mask of silent agony, his mouth stretched into a wide, soundless rictus. It looked as though something had tried to literally fold him inside out while he slept. They didn't call the police. They didn't try to help him. They simply fled. They stumbled and ran blindly down the trail, clutching flashlights and each other, not looking back, driven by a primal need to escape whatever had been able to breach their circle and violate Eric's sleeping bag so completely. They ran until the darkness began to thin and the pale, blessed light of morning finally broke. The storyteller, the one who survived, pulled into the first highway rest stop they found somewhere near dawn. They typed out their frantic, fragmented account on an online forum, police sirens wailing in the distance as they approached. In the final panicked line of the post, just before they hit submit, they added one last chilling detail. They had been alone in the car, but they mentioned hearing a quiet, steady breathing in the back seat. The final words of the account now burned into the digital lore of the missing. "I'm not alone anymore." To this day, the post remains online, an anonymous testimonial to a horror no one can explain. But police never found that car or the survivors at the rest stop. The search focused on the forest, but the only evidence ever recovered was found miles away from the crime scene, not far from that empty, remote rest stop. A small, low, sixth tent was pitched nearby, gray and still dripping with morning dew. Every forest has its memories. Every towering trunk, every whispering pine has seen what crawls and what buries beneath the soil. The woods are not empty. They are full of things that move only when the eye is turned away, full of things that wait for the light of your fire to fade. So when you venture out, when you feel that chill that has nothing to do with the temperature, when the shadows stretch too long and you feel the weight of countless unseen eyes, remember these tales. And if you hear someone walking around your tent at night, their steps slow, heavy, and wet, do not call out. Do not look outside. They already know your name. The only thing they want to know is what you'll do next.